Hello everyone, my name is Lowko and welcome to a new video about StarCraft II Heart of the Swarm. Today we're gonna take a look at a post that Davey, which is David Kim, who is the balance designer for StarCraft II, recently posted on the Battle.net forums right here, testing new balance changes this week. So we're gonna discuss a couple of changes that he proposed right now, and there's a couple of things I would like to say to it. So here we go. Before we begin, I'd like to point out that these changes are for a test map. There seem to be some confusion, blah blah blah. Okay, so basically he's saying we're going to be making this for a test map, and we're gonna see what the community says about this. So first and foremost, the first change that they have announced right now that they're thinking about implementing, the Mothership Core vision radius decreased from 14 to 9. What does Davey have to say about this? We currently feel this would be a helpful change, but we worry that the vision radius decrease doesn't really nerf the highest end Protoss players who are positioning the Mothership Core perfectly already. We'll talk to professional Protoss player about this one once the test map goes live. Okay, so this is a pretty big change actually. As you can see, it goes from 14 all the way to 9. Now, where does this really come into play? Well, not so much versus the Zerg matchups, like Protoss versus Zerg. This is maybe a little bit annoying in the earlier part of the game, when you have like a Stalker move out and you can sort of scout ahead what is going on with the Mothership Core. And also in the later part of the game where there's storms that need to be positioned properly. And you just sort of have the vision all around already, and you kind of know exactly where you need to plant your storms. But this is mostly going to affect Terran versus Protoss. Terran versus Protoss, or Protoss versus Terran rather, the Protoss player can just go for a blink all-in, and sort of just have this Mothership Core sit back while getting a huge range, and it's just really hard for Terrans to especially deal with the Mothership Core vision radius. And I'm honestly, yeah, I really like this change actually. It's a subtle change, it's something that really won't break any kind of meta games, because obviously it will still provide high ground vision and whatnot, but maybe what Davey is saying right here, that the highest level Protoss players are already positioning their Mothership Core perfectly, I think that's true, but still it's going to be impacting the game ever so slightly. Now then we go to arguably the biggest change, the blink cooldown increased from 10 to 15. This is just a straight up 50% nerf to the blink cooldown. This is a more direct nerf that affects all Protoss players. If blink play continues to be problematic, this sort of thing we'd want to see tested and prepared to put in the game. Okay, so this is a change that I personally think is way too big. Basically, the reason why they're doing this is obviously Terran versus Protoss. In the other matchup, Protoss versus Zerg, not really going to be very relevant. Protoss versus Protoss, you know, it's going to be annoying, it's just going to be one less strategy. But for Protoss versus Terran, it's quite important. And this would actually be a gigantic nerf, because any kind of Protoss all-in off of 2 or 1 bases with Blink is sort of just completely irrelevant all of a sudden. Because this is one of these builds that is basically all-in, and by nerfing this Blink cooldown by 50%, it will just straight up nerf the entire strategy and will be much easier to hold. So I think this is actually a much too big of a nerf. Now other than that, I don't really see why they're changing the blink cooldown, to be honest. It seems a little bit random, especially because it also affects obviously especially Protoss versus Protoss. Not so much Zerg versus Protoss, but Protoss versus Protoss will also change. It will actually make things like maybe like Stargate openers and whatnot a lot easier, because all of a sudden the Blink Stalkers will not be able to follow you as easily. So I think this nerf is a little bit too big. Considering they're already nerfing the Mothership Core vision radius, it seems a little bit redundant and a little bit double to also actually nerf the Blink cooldown. Now next up we have the Widow Mine splash damage. Components deal 40 plus 40 shield damage. We've seen some games against Protoss where Widow Mines are used, and they are very exciting to watch. That is your opinion right there, David Kim. Whether they're just Widow Mine drops or Widow Mines in combination with the Terran army, we feel like both of these strategies could use a bit of help. The Widow Mine potential against Protoss basic units will be unchanged for direct hits, because they already are getting one-shot, but we've reduced the number of indirect hits required against units such as Stalkers, Zealots, and Sentries. Also, when using Widow Mines properly against, or drops against Protoss, the chance of splash damage one-shotting probes will increase slightly. Now this is another change that I find a little bit random. I honestly don't really like the whole concept of a Widow Mine in general, and just making it stronger versus Protoss seems a little bit wonky. I personally would have seen rather a different kind of change, where it just made the game more exciting. Nowadays I think Widow Mine drops are kind of silly. You're kind of just dropping in the middle line and hoping that the Protoss player won't see it. I'm not really a big fan of these kind of strategies. Now all in all, it will just make the Widow Mine a whole lot more effective versus Protoss players, and we might actually see it a bit more in Protoss versus Terran, but I'm not really too happy with this change. I guess it is acceptable, but I would have rather have seen them changing something else instead. And then we get to another wonky change actually. The Tempest ground weapon damage increased from 30 to 30 plus 30 to structures. So basically what this means is that Tempest will normally deal 30 damage, but now, after this patch, it will actually deal 60 damage to buildings, to structures. Especially, obviously, spores and spine crawlers. Let's see what Davey has to say about this. We still think this is a good change, blah blah blah. Surprisingly, we've gotten a lot of feedback that proxy Tempest rushes are too strong right now. I have, honestly, like, I've seen so much StarCraft already. I have seen a proxy Tempest being played once, at a professional level that is. So it's a little bit wonky that David Kim is saying that that there's apparently a Tempest proxy that is happening a lot, and that is apparently really hard to hold. But I do agree that this is a little bit of a wonky change in general. I don't really see how this will change anything about the Zerg vs Protoss matchup, because the big problem in Zerg vs Protoss right now is the Swarm host. I still think, I know a lot of people share this opinion with me, I still think that the Swarm host is one of the most stupidly designed units in the entire game. I really enjoy all the Zerg units, except for the Swarm host. It is just a unit that benefits from sitting back as long as possible. The more Swarm hosts you get, the better you will become as a Zerg player. And I don't really like this at all. One Swarm host doesn't really have any effective uses, but if you get 20 Swarm hosts, or 60 Swarm hosts even, which sometimes we do see, it will just be a much stronger unit. And I think this is really where the game should be reconsidered and maybe even redesigned somewhat. And I would really like to see Blizzard taking a little bit more of a like actual change to the game, other than like tweaking little tiny stats like these. So I would like to see a complete redesign to the Swarm host, and it just changed the game completely. And now the last change that Davey actually has proposed right now is going to be the Hydralisk delay between attacks decrease from 0.83 to 0.75. This would increase the damage output from Hydralisk about 10%. So this is honestly, I like the idea. I'm a Zerg player. I like the idea of the Hydralisk being stronger, but I find it a little bit random. I don't know where the idea is coming from that apparently Hydralisk are too weak. They just don't really work in Zerg vs Zerg because roaches are, you know, they're just much more efficient. And they also really don't work against Zerg vs Terran, because Terran tanks are just incredibly good for this Hydvast. So I don't really see where this change is coming from either. I think it's a little bit wonky, but I won't be complaining considering it is obviously a Zerg buff. Now, people always ask me what I do want to see change, and honestly, there's a couple of things that I think really need to be changed. Like I already addressed previously, I think Swarm hosts are a really silly unit, and it should either be completely redesigned or just straight up removed out of the game. I do not enjoy the unit. I don't think it makes I don't think it makes any kind of exciting gameplay, if that makes sense, because it rewards turtling, and I think that's a really bad thing. Other than that, what I also think needs to be changed, and that is actually a more significant change, because it basically requires the Protoss race to be completely redesigned, is a change to the force field. I think force fields are a really silly ability. Either I think they should be keeping it into the game and actually give it like some sort of health boost that you can actually crash through force fields. Other than that, I really do not enjoy the ability. Now obviously this would mean that the entire Protoss race needs to be redesigned, because any kind of early game defense is completely reliant on force fields. And I do expect we're gonna see something like this maybe in Legacy of the Void, which is going to be the very final expansion for StarCraft II. Now another thing that I would really like to see changed from Protoss point of view is actually the Colossus. I think the Colossus is a really poorly designed unit. It is pretty cool, but it is also one of these units that is actually rewarded by simply sitting back. It doesn't require any micro, it doesn't really require much of anything, you just sort of put it in your army composition, it's really strong and it just sits there. I would like to see that either being changed or removed as well, but I'm not completely sure what it should be replaced with, honestly. So I think the Swarm house should be changed, I think the force field ability should be changed, and I think the Colossus should be changed. Other than that, what I would also like to see is an actual proper anti-air unit for Zerg. The only proper anti-air unit right now that we do have is the Queen, and the Queen is obviously one of these units that is strong, but it's incredibly slow off creep, and you do see it being added on more and more currently in the metagame, but I honestly would like to see a little bit of a change to that unit as well. Now, in general, I do really like the way that the Terran race is designed. It is pretty versatile, especially with the new mech openers that are becoming viable. But like I said, I would like to see a couple of actual major changes to StarCraft II, which would make the game a lot more exciting, and also switch up the metagame hugely. Now, I do understand, obviously, that straight up removing Colossus and that sort of awesomeness would mean that the entire Protoss race needs to be completely changed, okay? I'm not saying nerf the entire Protoss race and simply take the Colossus out of the game. I do think something else needs to be added into place, or something else needs to be buffed in order for that to work. But in general, I think that every single unit that needs to be in the game right now needs to be a unit that is actually hard to use. I think any kind of unit that is easy to use and does a lot of damage, such as the Colossus, is just poor game design. And also I think the same goes for the Swarm House. Like I already mentioned, it is a unit that is rewarded by simply sitting back and stacking up more of them. I think that is poor game design, and I would like to see that change. So that is my rambling right there about the proposed balance changes. I would love to read your thoughts on the balance changes as well. Let me know in the comment section right below that like button. And yeah, I would love to read your comments. I want to thank you guys all for watching. Have an amazing day. Do not forget to smile, and I will see you in the next video. Bye! My name is Lowko and welcome to a new game of StarCraft II Heart of the Swarm. Now today I felt like doing a little bit of a different something, because I'm actually gonna be recording my own hand while playing this live game of StarCraft II. I had a couple of people